Well, more and more ethical or fair trade products are being produced as consumer support grows. But the cost of producing products in line with ethical labour practices as well as environmental standards often deters some companies. But Professor Michael Hiscox from Harvard University believes that there's a good business case to be made for improving ethical standards. And for more on this, he joins me now. Good morning, Michael Hiscox. Welcome to Business Today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, Professor Hiscox, we've seen anecdotally big companies make a lot of money from producing goods cheaply in poorer countries by, cutting corners with wages and conditions. Right. Are we seeing a consumer backlash against that?
I think so, and I think there's probably been a backlash growing for a number of years, maybe 20 years. A lot of scandals involving large companies and sort of exposés about poor conditions, working conditions in their suppliers in China and in India, in Indonesia, in Vietnam. Large companies like Nike have been, sort of activist groups have discovered very poor conditions in their suppliers' factories, and I think that has sort of built and now perhaps has sort of dovetailed that anti-corporate sentiment, or that frustration with large corporations has sort of dovetailed with the global financial crisis and the new scrutiny that's been placed on large banks and worries about ethical standards there. So I think there is a growing sense among the public, especially the younger generation, that large companies need to lift their standards.
All right. So which aspects really need addressing, though? Is it labour, environment? What are the key issues?
I think the key issues are the same issues that have been there for a long time, involving child labour. I mean, everything that's associated with sweatshop production, including child labour, forced labour, unsafe working conditions in factories, the use of dangerous chemicals in farming. Those are the kinds of things that have been persistent problems that human rights groups in particular are worried about, and they haven't really gone away.
All right. Now, we've recently seen the emergence of fair trade goods. How are those being received?
Well, fair trade has grown remarkably. If you look at the global size of the fair trade market, it's grown at 40% or just over 40% for the last 5 or 6 years. So that's faster than the organic market, for example, ever grew. So it's growing at a remarkable rate. In Australia, the last few years it's grown above that, between 60 and 100% it's grown each year. So it's growing incredibly rapidly in Australia. Even in the last year, in 2008, for the last year we have data for, the market globally grew by 40%, even with the economic downturn at the end of the year. So it's been received well, and it's growing very, very quickly.
Okay, so you say that it's been received very well, but do these programs really work? Are they really effective?
Yeah, there I think we have some evidence, but it's not as systematic and rigorous as I would like to see. We need more impact evaluations, I think, of fair trade and other forms of ethical certification. The data that we do have does suggest that fair trade certified farmers do have higher incomes than counterparts that are growing the same crops in the same regions. They generally have, in their household, among the family as a whole, they have higher levels of health, higher levels of education among the children. So the data that I've seen is usually sort of survey-based data from developing countries, suggests that it does work at some sort of fundamental level, but we don't have very precise measures of how well it works among different types of producers.
All right. Now, Professor Hiscox, you believe there is a strong business case for ethical products. Can you explain your theory to us?
Yeah, the research I've been focused on is really on both ends of the supply chain. So a big part of the story is whether or not companies can expect consumers to respond favorably to fair trade and other forms of ethical certification. So if there's a market there, if companies can expect to win market share from their competitors, and if they can charge whatever the additional cost is required to improve ethical standards, if they can charge an extra premium and consumers will pay for that, that's sort of a key part of the business case. And the research we've done is sort of field experimental, where we examine how consumers respond in real shopping environments to ethical labels. And the results are, so far at least, that consumers respond very strongly, and that sales go up when a product is fair trade certified. And that that is a really big part of the business case, I think. The other part has to do with the effects of certifications for ethical and environmental standards in among producers, among suppliers in these global supply chains. So there it gets a little more complicated, but it's really a question of what are the effects of these standards on costs and what are the effects on productivity.
Apologies for butting in there, Professor Hiscox. We're nearly out of time, and I really do want to ask you this question, get your take, looking at the region, and let's look at China as an example. I've recently been there, was in the manufacturing quarter of the country. It's a very difficult, how would you propose to police something like this? You've got the central government, then you've got the disconnect between the central government and the provincial governments, working conditions there. It's a very difficult thing to kind of roll out, wouldn't it be? It
is. It's very difficult, and China is perhaps the hardest case. India is also particularly difficult, and I work a lot with some large corporations like Gap Inc., and they have a lot of suppliers in China and India. And the way they've tried to address these issues is by looking for independent third-party certifiers. So there's a group called Social Accountability International, and they have a set of core labor standards that look like the ILO's basic standards, no child labor, no forced labor, etc. And they send inspectors in, essentially, to the supplier facilities and examine the facilities, check for all these standards, and they provide sort of an extra layer that's completely separate from the Chinese government, that provides information to Gap and ultimately to consumers about conditions in their supplier facilities.
All right. Unfortunately, Michael Hiscox, we've run out of time. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.